I normally start off by saying welcome to the Airgronomics Zoom call, but everybody already knows that and it says it in the title. So we're just going to start bullshitting, if that's cool with you.
Yeah, sure thing.
So first off, who is Carmen? Okay, we're going to try to handle this in a little bit different approach because I crawled down the rabbit hole, deep down into the rabbit hole, and did some studying. And I get the gist, and I know kind of who you are, but I wanna know kind of what is your why and who is Carmen Magro?
Huh. Well, that could be pretty loaded, but
It is loaded.
in relation to who I am and how I've kind of navigated to this career and where we are now, I think it really is a result of what drives me internally. I didn't grow up around the game of golf or around turf. I could probably make an argument that I always had a green thumb because I seemed to be the best tomato grower in my neighborhood as a kid. Growing up in a small part of Philadelphia, where you kind of got to learn street smarts to survive. And but honestly, a golf club in the neighborhood where I grew up was it is a weapon. I mean, I'll be honest with you, it wasn't to play the game of golf. If we found a golf ball, we grabbed an old bat or an aluminum bat and tried to see how far we could hit that golf ball. And honestly, we just hoped that we didn't hear glass on the end of it. And so I didn't really grow up with an appreciation of the game or even the science of turf management. It wasn't.
And we'll get into the turf later.
Yeah.
In a few questions, but this is I just want to know what gets you going.
Well, I believe I believe that we're all part of this earth to be part of a team that should be rowing in the same direction. And I don't mean like under some dictatorial rule or something. I mean that it's a privilege, not a right, to be, to just walk this earth. And the resources that we use to survive should be judicious at the very least. And that we should be responsible for our actions and the influences we make on others. And I feel like, that's a lesson I learned hard from my parents as a kid. And I've tried to carry that through everything in my life, whether it's my kids or the personal things I do, but my passions, and I think it's why I've developed a passion to play music and a passion to fly an airplane and a passion to do things that many people would say, what? Why would you even, where do you get the time to do that? Where do you get the time to do this? And it's not about the time at all. It's not about planning out a schedule. It's about just having an avenue to express the feelings I have just for life in general. And so those kind of core values are things that I've tried to carry through everything I do in my life. And it certainly has carried into my career. But I know you just said you're going to talk a little bit about turf soon. One thing I never really looked at myself as until I heard it from another was one of my mentors was Dr. Tom Watschke, who as everybody may know has passed away now, but he really was a revolutionary in our industry, and it was great having him as my primary advisor through my early on turf studies and well beyond that. And I was at his roasting event or his retirement sort of event where he was retiring from turf management on a full-time basis. And during his talk, he actually singled me out, and I was honored that that was the case. But he called me his eternal student. He says, Carmen has found a way to be a student at everything he does. And that's what has made him influential in our industry. And I hope he and all my students carry on that kind of mentality. And it really hit me. It made me realize that I am a student. I feel like the only time I've gotten into trouble in my life is when I forgot that I'm a student, and I should be learning something, not trying to change something against the will of others, or things like that. If you think about every argument you ever get in your life, and the reason why there's that old adage, whatever your significant other says, that, don't argue, just go along with it. It's not that we go along with it. It's just that the voice of reason it's always there. We just have to listen for it and follow the cues. And so I've tried to carry that into everything I do, even with my kids. If you can just realize that children live for the moment. They live in that moment. They're not worried about what happened yesterday. They're not worried about what's happening tomorrow. They're just worried about what's happening right now. And if you approach that as a student to learn from them, you'll have a much better relationship, being with them at that moment in time. So anyway, so what makes me, I don't know. I'm still a student. I'm still trying to learn from others. I still make mistakes just like everybody else, but hopefully I learn how not to make those same mistakes and move on. And I genuinely do feel that I want to help people. I really, when I approach anything I do, whether it's in my career or in my life, I'd like to empathize with that individual and try to see the world from their perspective, and then maybe offer something that might help them improve that particular situation. And I've carried that through in my career, and I think that's why I love it so much.
I think that's definitely, like I said, we'll touch on that a little bit later, but I think that's definitely one of your strengths is the fact that, like Billy Joel said, you can laugh with the sinner and cry with the saint, that's, or whatever. But you're dealing with guys like me, privately owned public facility,
Yeah.
and then you're dealing with some of the highest end clubs in the world, and dealing with clubs over in Europe that we would kill to go see. But yet you basically create, everyone's an equal, it seems to be in your book, and you're willing to spend that much time with that individual. And that's what kind of drew me in, is like, you know what, he cares about this situation that I'm in, and he wants to help me improve it. So that was a big plus.
Well, that's interesting you say that. I do try to do that. I never have a predisposed position on how to do things. I know that the challenges in not only in our careers, but in this industry but in life, they're endless. You don't know. I hope I don't know if one of my former employees will be watching this or not, but there was a time when I was sitting in my superintendent office, and in walks my foreman, who I had graduated up to the foreman level. He was a Hispanic individual, had given him an opportunity to expand, and he grew into a very strong employee of mine who I could trust to carry out jobs with the staff. And I knew in my absence, he would get the job done right. And one day he walks in my office, and my staff knew that if my door was closed, they could say anything to me. You can tell me, you can use profanity and name calling to no end, and you're not going to get in trouble for it. If it happened outside my office, that's a different story. But in my office, they could say anything they wanted to. So this gentleman walks through the door, shuts the door behind him, and I'm thinking, oh boy. And he looked at me and says, I'm really in some trouble. And I asked, what kind of trouble are you in? He says, I got 2 women pregnant at the same time. That's literally what his problem was. And I'm worried, it's something else. But then I suddenly realized this is not something they teach you in school. We come out of school learning all the nuts and bolts of turf grass management. We learn a little bit about HR management, a little bit about business and all that good stuff. But this kind of real life stuff, it brings you back to your roots. I lost my parents at a very young age, and I learned how to be independent pretty early on in life. And when you hear a statement like that, you immediately forget about all your professionalism, all your formalities, and you come right down to earth and try to put yourself in his shoes and realize this is probably the most stressful thing this guy has ever gone through and ever will go through. And you got to just kind of put yourself in that moment to not only be a lending ear, but to say something that matters, and do something that matters. Don't just say anything, because that could do more harm than good. And so it's interesting that you see me that way, because when I do walk onto these properties, like sometimes I get to sit down with the elite group of agronomists with the RNA and sit in a room where they're bouncing ideas off of me. And that's an honor to me to just be there, to let alone do that. And then, and then to walk the Open, or to walk the US Amateur, which I'll do next week at Oakmont, and to do these things, and then to walk into a mom and pop property in the middle of Gothenburg, Sweden, where they still have dirt floors for a maintenance shop, and the mechanic's laying on his back to change the height of cut on a fairway mower. And you just always have to put yourself into the perspective of the others. It's so easy to walk into an operation and say, you guys should be doing this. You should be doing this. How can you expect this club to do what you want them to do when you don't give them the money to do the operation? Anybody can do that. But to walk into a property and put yourself in their shoes and just remember the fundamentals of what we're trying to achieve at the property, it allows me to talk to anybody at any level in this industry. And I've used that to my advantage. I've used it to learn from the most educated people, and I've used it to share what I know with people that really could use some help. And in the end, you find out that it's all valuable conversation, no matter who it is you're talking to. Yeah.
You're definitely correct. Through the deep dive, I did see your past with how young you were when both your parents passed, your father and then your mother, correct?
Yep, that's true.
You were definitely independent, and I feel like I can talk, having lost my dad a few months ago, and you were one of the first ones to reach out. How much did that mold you into who you are and realize life's short? We're not guaranteed tomorrow. Did that change things, the way you look at things?
It's a touchy subject for me, because many people would look at this as a tragedy in a child's life to lose a parent or two. But then to have it revisited years later, I lost a brother to suicide, which is one thing I just can't get my hands around, that something like that could happen to somebody so close to us. But yes, it did shape my life big time. So my father was when I was 10 years old. And I don't remember a lot of lessons from my father, because I was young. I was kind of a stubborn little kid. I like to do my own thing. I had two brothers, so there were three boys with my parents. I always had my own bedroom. My older brother shared a room with my younger brother. And to this day, I have no idea why. I must have been a real pain in the ass. I mean, I don't know why they'd separate us, but something, something, they must have seen something in us. And, but my father, even though he passed, he did teach me a couple of valuable lessons. I wanted to learn to play baseball once. And not knowing much about my father's history with the sport, I came down one Saturday morning. He's sitting at the table reading a paper. And I had a bat, a ball, and a glove with me. And he said, "Where do you think you're going?" And I said, "I'm going to go try out for the baseball team. There's tryouts today." And he said, "Do you think you know what it takes to play the game of baseball?" And I said, "Yeah, a bat, a ball, and a glove." And he just smirked and said, "Okay, you go enjoy your day." Well, I go to this practice, never played the game before. I was 8 years old. They put me at second base. And the very first ball that's hit to me, I try catching with the glove down, the open side of the glove down. Ball bounces off the glove, cracks me right in the eyeball, and I come home with this big egg on my head. My dad's still at the table. Now he's doing something else, but he sees me. My mother sees me. She wants to help me. My dad says, "Grab your stuff and come out to the yard." And so I grab my ball, my bat, my glove. He says, "Give me that bat." He takes the bat and the ball, he tells me to go to the other end of the yard, and he starts hitting baseballs at me. And he's hitting them hard on the ground, and I'm getting killed. They're hitting me in the chest, they're hitting me in the leg. I'm not catching anything. And finally, I realized if I don't start catching this ball, I'm going to get, I may die today in my yard. And so I do. I catch a couple of balls. He comes up to me, puts his arm around me, and he says, Carmen, you can have all the tools in the world, all the equipment in the world. It could be the best equipment made. If you don't have this and you don't have this in everything you do, nothing else matters. And so I learned that lesson. Now, I was only 8 years old, so it didn't really hit home until he passed. And when he passed away, and then my mother got sick with breast cancer when I was a teenager, I was sitting in the hospital. My mom's pretty much, her days are kind of numbered, and there's a whole story around that as well. But my uncle, Charlie, who was my dad's brother, came to see my mother, and he sat down next to me, asked me how I'm holding up. And I said, I never got to learn a whole lot about my dad. And just when I'm getting close to my mother, I had just told my mother I loved her probably for the first time in my life. And it was only because I learned dramatically that she didn't have much time to live. And I realized how bad it was. Like once you find out your mother has cancer and she starts taking this chemotherapy and all these pills, you just think that's just the way life's going to be for a while. She's on this medication. Things are going to just go on. Who knows how long? She seems to be doing fine. She's in remission. But then that one day you walk in the hospital to see her when she's there for a checkup, and you overhear a conversation that's something to the extent of, have you told your boys yet? And you realize suddenly, this is a lot worse than you think. And that's life-changing. You're like, I'm a teenager. I thought I got the whole world ahead of me. And for the first time, I put myself in my mother's shoes. And it taught me that valuable lesson of empathizing with other people and learning how important it is to see life through their eyes. That's the only way you can help people. It's the only way you can matter to somebody. If you're really selfish and feel like it's only about what's important to you, you can't help anybody. That's just the way it is. So those two lessons, I did end up losing my mother about 17 days after that conversation. But my uncle, when he asked me that question, and I told him, I'm losing my mother just when I'm getting close to her. I never really knew my father. He starts telling me all these great stories. He tells me a story about my dad and how he joined World War II right after Pearl Harbor was bombed, because he came down the hallway in their house and said, Charlie, I'm joining the Army. And I don't want to see some terrorist out of Germany tell me how I'm going to raise a family someday.